Now, as you've seen, Donald Trump has been speaking at CPAC outside Washington, D.C., but he is not the only one who has been taking the stage at the conference. Nigel Farage, no stranger to Sky News viewers, gave an absolute stemliner of a speech yesterday where he warned about the threats to freedom and had some choice words about Australia. To Farage, and I'm sure many of you would agree, COVID, and specifically the response to COVID, was one of the worst things that could have happened to the cause of liberty that had previously been fought for in the English-speaking world for centuries.
In the name of coronavirus, governments, state governors in America took away from us liberties and freedoms that had been built, defended, fought for over generations and over centuries. We gave unlimited power to people to lock us inside our houses, to tell us we couldn't visit our elderly relatives, to tell us in our case we couldn't even play golf or go fishing. No, we had to do what big government told us to do. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what tyranny looks like.
And Farage had specifically called out Australia for what has happened to our once freewheeling, freedom-loving society.
We can go to Australia, which has now become one of the wokest places on earth.
Well, is he wrong? I don't think so. Besides COVID, Farage also placed a lot of the blame for what has been happening at the feet of big tech.
So why is conservatism doing well in the non-English speaking world and as badly as it is in our world? I'll tell you why. It's what comes from the West Coast. It's what comes from big tech. It is the dominance of those companies in the English speaking world that has spread this poison through our systems. I'm hoping and praying that Elon Musk taking over Twitter starts to redress some of this balance. I really am.
And it wasn't all doom and gloom. Farage suggested that there is still a silent majority in the English-speaking world that could turn the tide for freedom again, even when things look at their darkest.
It could be easy, in a quiet, reflective moment, to think we're losing. And maybe we've lost. Maybe we've lost everything. The Judeo-Christian principles upon which our civilization were founded are under attack. The belief that the family is a good thing and a good unit in which to bring up children is viciously under attack. We can easily get down and depressed. The truth is, there is still in America and across the free world, there is still a mainstream majority for common sense, for decency. It's still there.
And to prove his point, he pointed to Scotland, where the odious Nicola Sturgeon was recently evicted from power for her awful transgender rights bill and a hideous case that saw a male rapist sent to a woman's prison because that was how he identified. And he saw this as a cause for hope.
And suddenly, that pendulum that's gone that way for all those years has swung back. Nicola Sturgeon has now resigned as First Minister of Scotland. The legislation has been scrapped, it's gone, and the silent majority have had their voices heard. If they can turn it around in Scotland against a woman with that huge level of power, can you turn it round in this great country of the United States of America? Can you turn this round? I can't hear you. Can you turn this round?
And, you know, it wasn't all about Farage or even Trump either. A lot of other talent, some of it potentially presidential or at least vice presidential, also took the stage. And it all highlights one thing. The Republicans heading into 2024 have a hell of a deep bench of talent and are indeed spoiled for choice, as can be seen by the candidates and thinkers refining their themes and messages as campaign season kicks into gear. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was there, and he didn't just talk about security and defense issues, but wokeness and the fight against identity politics.
This basic idea that each of us is endowed by our Creator with these unalienable rights and we are equal in the eyes of the Lord is the antidote to the poisonous lie of equity, wokeness, and identity politics. We're going to do better.
Now, Pompeo hasn't declared yet, but he is considered a likely chance to have a shot at the nomination. And then there was Nikki Haley, who has also thrown her hat into the ring, though right now the best money has her as a potential vice presidential candidate. Either way, you tell me, Don Lemon, does this sound like a woman who is past her prime?
We need to stop with the earmarks and pet projects once and for all. Joe's only regret is that he hasn't spent more. He wants more handouts to illegal immigrants, more bailouts to rich college students, and more carve-outs to big labor and big business. He doesn't mind spending so much because he knows it's your money that he's spending. And the only thing Joe Biden needs to spend more of is more time in retirement.
Yeah, gosh, it sounded almost like she was speaking about Australian labor for a moment. I don't know if you're watching Jim Chalmers. And outsider candidate Vivek Ramaswamy had some home truths to tell about the climate cult.
The climate religion in America that says that we have to fight carbon emissions at all costs in the United States while we shift those same carbon emissions to places like China that supposedly, even if you believe in this religion, you would have embraced nuclear energy, which is the best form of carbon-free energy production known to mankind. And yet these people oppose nuclear energy. What's really going on is that the climate religion has about as much to do with the climate as the Spanish Inquisition had to do with Christ, which is to say nothing at all. It is about power, dominion, control, punishment, and apologizing for what we have achieved in this country in the modern West as we know it.
Woo! My favorite bit, though, was Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, who had this uplifting and powerful statement about the state of the United States.
I do not hate anyone. I do not hate anyone. I look for grace wherever I can find it. So I say this gently. The Biden administration sucks.
Now, most notably, though, even with all those names, Ron DeSantis wasn't there, and he's considered to be the one to watch right now as a potential future leader of the party. What does this tell us, though, overall? Well, if you're on the right, the American Republicans have some pretty big talent across the entire spectrum that should see them through the coming generational change in American politics. And indeed, that there is hope, as Nigel Farage suggested, for a conservative resurgence, renaissance even, in the English-speaking world, starting potentially in the U.S. and eventually landing, one can hope, in Australia. Meanwhile, in the interests of fairness and balance, we may as well also check in and see how the Democrats are going.
On COVID, Oregon, we all kind of accountable.